Beijing, China, September 16, 2025. The diplomatic corridors in Beijing grew tense on Tuesday as China openly called upon both the United States and Japan to withdraw the US-manufactured Typhon mid-range missile system, which has been stationed in Japan for the first time. The announcement came during a regularly scheduled press briefing at the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where spokesperson Lin Jian strongly criticized the deployment, warning of destabilizing consequences for Asia's fragile security balance. The Typhon missile system, designed to provide a flexible and rapid response to mid-range threats, has been a cornerstone of US military modernization efforts in the Indo-Pacific. Its deployment in Japan marks a significant shift in the defense posture of Tokyo, underscoring its close alliance with Washington. However, for Beijing, the decision carries a different symbolism, one that reinforces fears of encirclement and ignites warnings about an impending arms race in the region. Lin Jian, stepping to the podium before a packed room of journalists, wasted no time in addressing the issue head-on. He condemned the decision by both Washington and Tokyo, framing it as a reckless move that undermines regional peace. Lin Jian said, "The US and Japan, disregarding China's solemn concerns, have insisted on deploying the Typhon mid-range missile system in Japan under the pretext of joint exercises. China expresses strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition to this. The US deployment of the Typhon system in Asian countries undermines the legitimate security interests of others, heightens the risk of a regional arms race and military confrontation, and poses a substantive threat to regional strategic security." The gravity of his statement set the tone for the entire press conference, emphasizing not only China's disapproval, but also its portrayal of the deployment as an existential challenge to the region's equilibrium. Though directed at Washington and Tokyo, Beijing's message carried resonance for the wider neighborhood. The Indo-Pacific, already a theater of strategic contest, has seen an acceleration of defense pacts, naval maneuvers, and technology transfers in recent years, from AUKUS to enhanced US. Philippines cooperation, China views these moves as part of a larger containment strategy designed to limit its rise. Lin Jian underscored that Beijing's concerns are not limited to bilateral frictions, but extend to the collective security of the region. Lin Jian said, "The US and Japan should truly respect other countries' security concerns and take concrete actions to contribute positively to regional peace and stability, rather than the opposite." China urges the US and Japan to heed the voices of regional countries, correct their wrongful actions, and promptly withdraw the Typhon mid-range missile system. The call to heed the voices of regional countries reflects China's attempt to rally broader Asian sentiment against what it sees as unilateral militarization. It also hints at Beijing's diplomatic strategy to frame US deployments not as bilateral arrangements, but as threats to the collective interest of all neighbors. The images from the briefing told their own story. Cameras captured Lin Jian entering the room with a measured stride, adjusting his papers before delivering the strongly worded statement. Close-up shots showed his tone was calm but firm, consistent with China's careful presentation of itself as a rational actor compelled into objection by external provocation. Wide shots revealed a room filled with journalists, their pens and cameras poised, ready to amplify Beijing's message worldwide. For China, public briefings such as this one serve dual purposes. Domestically, they reinforce a narrative of vigilance and sovereignty, reminding citizens that the government is actively defending national interests. Internationally, they are a stage for signaling resolve to allies, rivals, and undecided actors alike. Japan's willingness to host the Typhon system illustrates its shifting defense posture in the face of regional threats. For Tokyo, the rationale is straightforward. North Korea's persistent missile launches, China's expanding naval presence in the East China Sea, and uncertainty surrounding future US commitments all demand stronger deterrence. The Typhon system, capable of countering a range of airborne and ballistic threats, is intended to close existing gaps in Japan's defense umbrella. Washington, for its part, has long pressed allies to shoulder more of the security burden while integrating seamlessly into US-led defense networks. By deploying Typhon in Japan, the US not only reassures Tokyo, but also signals to Beijing that American military resolve in the Indo-Pacific is deepening. Beijing's opposition stems from both practical and symbolic grounds. On the practical side, Chinese defense analysts argue that the Typhon system's range could be directed toward Chinese territory, potentially neutralizing parts of Beijing's strategic deterrence. Symbolically, it represents yet another layer of US encroachment into what China considers its near abroad. Lin Jian's statements repeatedly emphasized this theme of sovereignty and security. By characterizing the system as a substantive threat to regional strategic security, he underscored the seriousness with which Beijing interprets even defensive deployments when led by Washington. The deployment is unlikely to remain a purely bilateral issue between Japan and China. Other countries in Southeast Asia and the Pacific are watching closely, aware that their own security postures may eventually be shaped by similar deployments or by the reactions they provoke. For instance, nations like South Korea and the Philippines could become future candidates for similar US systems, potentially intensifying regional divides. Beijing's repeated reference to regional voices suggests it will seek to mobilize ASEAN and other multilateral forums to criticize Washington's military footprint. Whether those efforts gain traction remains uncertain, as some states welcome US presence as a counterbalance to Chinese power. This is not the first time Beijing has objected to US missile deployments. Nearly a decade ago, the installation of the THAAD missile defense system in South Korea triggered a sharp backlash from China, including economic retaliation. That episode left a lasting imprint on regional relations, with many policymakers wary of similar repercussions. The Typhon issue could follow a comparable trajectory, testing the resilience of Japan's economy and its diplomatic bandwidth in managing fallout with its largest trading partner. While Beijing's opposition is emphatic, it is also calculated. China is balancing its criticism with broader diplomatic goals, particularly at a time when it seeks to stabilize relations with Washington on trade and climate issues. By framing its objection around regional peace and stability, China aims to project itself not as a spoiler, but as a guardian of collective security, even as it presses its own strategic interests. For Tokyo, the challenge lies in balancing its alliance commitments with the economic realities of interdependence with China. Withdrawal of the Typhon system, as Beijing demands, seems highly unlikely. Yet Tokyo must navigate the diplomatic fallout carefully to avoid escalation that could spill into trade or people-to-people ties. Tuesday's press conference in Beijing crystallized the growing strain between China and the US-Japan alliance. Lin Jian's remarks, delivered with clarity and determination, were not merely about one missile system, but about the larger architecture of security in Asia. The Typhon system has become a symbol for Washington and Tokyo, a shield against threats. For Beijing, a spear pointed at the heart of regional stability. As Lin Jian's words echoed through the briefing hall, the message was unmistakable. Beijing will not sit quietly as the US deepens its military presence on its doorstep. The demand for the withdrawal of Typhon may go unanswered, but the confrontation it represents is likely to define yet another chapter in the unfolding story of power and rivalry in the Indo-Pacific.